or Spring Boot or another framework. So the idea is we're going to be adding features into our web framework. Let's see. About me, professional for 20 plus years. I was in media for a long time. The last year or so, I've been diving into Elixir, Phoenix, AI, particularly focused on LLMs and the interplay between LLMs and other apps. Feel free to send me a connect, take a look at that's my site right there, all the slides and links to the code and everything will be there. Well, it's there right now, so you can take a look. The other thing about this talk is it's scheduled for Codebeam America next week. So this is a little bit of a work in progress. I'm really looking for feedback or anything else that you can tell me afterwards around where the content was confusing, a move from one area to another, what could use more explanation or anything along those lines. So feel free to in real time or at the end hit me up and let me know your thoughts. All right, so I'm sure we're all familiar with the tagline of 2024, which is AI the shit out of everything. That's what every single person that owns an app is saying these days. Before we go forward, though, I want to just give a little bit of a check-in with where everyone is. That's maybe a little bit hard to do on the screen. Let me see if I can get a different view. So yeah, so the idea here is just to give me a picture of where you guys are at in terms of do you use ChatGPT? I'm assuming most people use ChatGPT or Bard or Gemini daily. Code generators, you guys use code generators? Kind of hard to tell. Okay, I see Hyde's nodding. Has anyone built an LLM based app already? Okay. Hey Neil, what's up, man? You guys,
Sergio said yes. Sergio Tapia is in the room.
okay, cool. So that makes sense. Hey Jeremy, what's up? Does anyone use an agent framework like LangChain? Going up and down. Okay, Patrick has. Okay, cool. All right. That just gives me a little bit of picture where we're at. All right, so some terminology. These are on the left. These are some things that I'm assuming folks are familiar with. Models, LLM, and then just for this group, Elixir, Phoenix, LiveView, Ecto, things that any of those, anyone want to raise the hand, any of those that are confusing? Okay. And then the things that we'll go over today are embeddings, vector databases, chunking, RAG, fine tuning, if we get that far, and AI agents, maybe some other things. All right, so since we're going to talk AI, I think the first thing that we need to do is look at how we make sure that when we're training models, we are not overfitting on our data. So you use a technique called ridge regularization. This is actually a joke slide. We're not going to do anything like this today. There's not going to be any linear algebra involved. What we're going to do instead is connect our apps up to APIs and see what we can do with them. So the context for today's talk is right. What I think about is like the top of the pyramid. We're building end user applications. There's a lot of other areas that potentially folks on this call work in around creation of libraries or models or tools. As a Phoenix discussion, this is the area that we're focused on. So I wanted to give a little bit of thought around why everyone is talking about AI these days. So um, the first way to think about it is it's just really cool. I mean, the things that you can do with it out of the box are pretty amazing. The image generation stuff, I mean, this image just came out of nowhere. The chatting versus searching, that, if you have the experience of not really sure what you're looking for and you're chatting with a chat bot, it's a totally different experience than searching. And then it sounds like most of you guys have played with Copilot, which, the first time I saw it was just an aha moment for me. So that's one reason why it's blowing up. But I think more compelling is this reason, which is if we're going to build an app, the question is, how many layers do you want to have to build? Um, you know, if you were, let me show you what some of these layers are. So these are just the foundational layers that if you were to build an AI app, um, you know, 20 years ago, the GPUs and CUDA didn't exist, right? So you'd have to start at the very bottom layer and build that yourself. After that came the ML tools, PyTorch, that allowed you to start creating models on top of that. Now there are available models. Then there's dev libraries that are out. So when you look at when all these happen, and if you think about how far back you want to go in terms of time, then that's how many layers in this pyramid you need to build. So if I overlay the years that these things came out, I think it gives a pretty compelling thought on um, why 2022, 2023, 2024 are exploding in terms of AI, because now for the first time you can focus on just building the app. You don't have to start with getting a whole bunch of data and creating a model from scratch. That's very expensive, very time consuming. I could have easily put on people here, because you'd have to go hire a bunch of PhDs and do the linear algebra if you wanted to start at for instance, the model level. But as of 2023, a lot of these different interesting libraries exist, and we're going to talk about some of them today. Looking for feedback on things that you guys think are table stakes that are not listed here. So anyone want to call out something that they see that they think should have been included? Or anyone have a question at this point?
I'm pretty new to all of this, so I'm just absorbing it.
Does this make sense, Neil?
So far it does.
Okay. I think this next slide will help put some additional context for you, knowing your background, but I think for everybody on the call as well, is you can use the same um, pattern to essentially predict the dot-com boom. So, if you were to build an app in 1990, you would have had to build the entire platform. And people did, right? I mean, there was Oracle and people that had, tons and tons of cash. And so they built the entire stack themselves. Oops. But by 1995, all of these pieces were available off the shelf. And so all you had to do to put an app together is pull in your LAMP stack, grab a Linux box, and now you could run a site, for tens of dollars, not millions of dollars. That's the exact same situation that we're in right now for adding AI to things, is you can do some of the techniques that we're talking about today and add AI-based features to your app for tens of dollars, not millions of dollars. And then if you look at the, I'm showing a pyramid because it's sort of foundational layers, but really I think the opportunity looks like this, where most people are actually in this area. 90% of what people are building apps. Operate, how many people are building libraries, or, there's a fair number of models and tools, but really the set of these things is in the single digits generally. So that's great for us. So what we're going to do, given all that, is we're going to focus on features. We're not going to move down the stack and talk about models. We're not going to talk about those pieces. We're really going to talk about how we add something into the app. All right. Any questions before I move on? All right, so let's get to the good stuff. What we're going to talk about is embeddings. In each of these, I'll explain, I'll give intuition as I go. Embeddings, generated text, generated images, structured text, and I'll explain the difference. RAG architecture, and that's part, and I'll explain that, and then AI agents if we can get that far. But first step is, in order to explain some of these features, what I did was I started with creating a pretty simple game that I think can help me show some of these features in a way that's slightly more interesting than, building a hello world or whatever, pick your favorite, Twitter clone or whatever. So the code is all there. I'm going to show snippets of the code, but if you want to look at the full thing, it's all there. And feel free to play along as well. I'm going to actually start with, so what I did was I first built this game just using Elixir and LiveView without any AI. And then what I'm going to do is add those features in. So this is what the game looks like. The game is in the style of a choose your own adventure game. Are you guys familiar with that? Okay. Where basically what you're going to do is you're going to, actually maybe I added one more slide on this. Yeah, so the way the game works is you start at a location, you're going to move to another location by calling some action, and then you end up not in a non-linear way somewhere in this world. So the way that the books used to work is, you read page 1, it said, do you want to go into the woods and you want to fight the dragon or whatever, and then you kind of jump to page 42 or 105, and then it had you moving all around. So you had the feeling of agency.
Used to love books. They're great.
Yeah.
Grew up with
Yeah,
those.
they're really clever. All right, so if I let's go to the Hello World game. And this is the pre-AI version. By the way, all of these things, of course, were created with DALL-E, and the text and everything was generally created by, first of all, me manually going to ChatGPT and saying, give me a description, blah, blah, blah. All right, so if I go and play the game, you have this description, and then you have a couple of different actions you can take. So I can say I want to investigate the room. It says beware the basement. All right, then I have 2 different options. I can go in the backyard or I can go in the basement. So let's go in the backyard. This is the hello world, so it's supposed to be exceedingly simple, but game over. I can go back to it and I can play it again, and let's go see what happens when I go down to the back into the basement. You lose. So that's the very simple version of the game out of the gate. Now let's see if we can make it a little bit more interesting. All right, so the first concept that we're going to add is called embeddings. So the intuition is this. When you have an embedding, it is you can apply a function to some text and it will take relevant pieces of that text and turn it into a bunch of numbers that have some meaning. The one of the favorite ways I like to think about this is if you take a king, take the embedding for a king, the string, add to it the embedding for a woman, you'll get a value that's very similar to the embedding for a queen, because the numbers have some context and they mean something. So let me show you how we might use this. This is sort of a foundational piece of some of the things we do. So this is how it looks. This is a standard definition within Elixir world of, here's a schema. I have a thing called actions, a bunch of not just standard values, but then I added this thing called an embedding, and I'm using a PG vector. PG vector is a extension to Postgres. The reason I like it, I'll show you in a minute, but one reason I like it is I don't have to worry about an additional piece of my architecture, and I can do SQL. I can create SQL statements related to embeddings that include other elements of my data model. So I can say, give me something that is similar as well as from the location I'm at or something like that. All right, so that's the code. The way I incorporate this is this is a kind of a standard create action. Normally these two lines wouldn't be there at the top, but all I'm doing is whenever someone issues a create, I'm going to take the command portion of the attributes they're passing me, go hit this API, this function that says embed, get the information for that, and then store it into my model. And that allows me to do what is really cool here, which is when somebody types in a text, I can look for things that are similarly spaced or have text similarity. We use a function called cosine distance, which I should create a visualization for this, but essentially it means what is the, like if you had two different lines like going like this, are they really far apart or are they really close together, if you remember what cosine is. That's the most math that I have to do today. So let me show you what that allows us to do. All right, so if you recall in the previous one, I had to put in this 1, 2, 3 in order to I could have typed the whole thing out, but then a person would have to type it perfectly. What I can do now is I could go in here. I took out the numbers and you just type what you want to do. So I could say, gather supplies. And it's going to do the action as if I had clicked the number. I could also just say, get some stuff. And it does the same action as gather supplies because it understands contextually that those things are similar in space. The cool thing now that means is I could have hidden commands that I don't have to prompt you. That's a limitation of the original book, is every possibility was written there because I had to tell you where you can go next. Now I can do things that aren't visible. But let's just say let's bounce, which hopefully means let's leave home. All right, so now I'm at the new place. All right, so that's embeddings and a pretty sort of trivial, but I think interesting use case for embeddings. Any questions on that?
So it's not doing anything dynamic with the images right now, is it? It's just text, right? Or understanding the context of the text that you're typing
Correct.
in.
The only thing that we've added so far is just understanding when you type something in, what you mean out of the list of available options.
And what you're doing is you're taking whatever you type in and you're comparing that embedding versus the ones that are tied to those commands that you actually know about in your story, right?
Yes, so let me show you.
To find the closest one.
Correct. So this guy, all right. So whenever I create an action, so when I just set up my project and seed my data, I create an embedding for every possible action. Now, when somebody takes an action, I'm going to say, go get me an action based on the text that they've entered and the location that they're at. So this is where I was saying the PG vector is pretty cool, because I'll go and first create an embedding based on what the text is their input text. And then I'll go and look at all the available actions, order them by cosine distance, and then I'll also layer in this. I want it to be
To make sure
from-
it's valid in their location. Yeah,
Yep.
makes sense. Cool. Awesome.
And
Cool.
so if they typed the same thing that you wrote there, then it would be 1, right? The cosine distance would be 1. So that's an exact match, right?
It would be close to 0, actually. It's like, think
close.
about it like a
Yeah, 1 would be orthogonal, 0 would be
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, 90
Okay.
degrees, I think. Yeah. So a limit of 1 here is, I mean, not limit of 1, but the minimum distance of 1 is really I'm getting anything. I'll use this minimum distance differently later on. All right. Good question. Oops, okay. All right, text generation. I think this one is, somewhat intuitive already, but it's very similar to what you do with ChatGPT. I think there is, you guys are probably good to go, but I see some confusion at times. People are between ChatGPT and GPT. Everything that we're doing here is just talking straight to the APIs that are behind the scenes. There's nothing, by the way, I'm using OpenAI a lot here just because they're super easy. The cost is, I did the math yesterday. It's something like I can do 10 million token requests for $1. So you're not going to hopefully run up a huge bill using this stuff. And if you want to, we can talk about some of the reasons maybe that you would want to move off of OpenAI and look at some of the other models. But for the most part, if you're just looking to play around with this stuff, go set up an account with them, hit their APIs. They're pretty intuitive. Their documentation is pretty good.
So your embeddings as well as your text generation are both using the Open API? Okay.
Yes. Yep. Yes. All right. So I guess I didn't show the actual hit to the embedding API, but I mean, it's literally a post. You send some data and you get some data back. Pretty simple. All right. So not too much interesting here. I mean, what I'm doing, I've created a function, get completion. I'm going to send it a prompt, sort of create a prompt, and then what I was trying to do here is make it so that somebody could ask something about a location. I would just make up some story to tell them based on it. And I'll show you why I'm making that more complex as I go. But when you hear about prompt engineering, I think that there's 2 terms for prompt engineering sometimes, or 2 things that people mean when they say prompt engineering. Sometimes it's things like I want you to imagine that you're the best programmer in the world and give me some HTML that does blah, blah, blah. Like that's sort of prompt engineering in terms of how to get the best response out of your LLM. I think the more interesting version of prompt engineering is this kind of stuff, is what information am I going to get from my system, put it into the prompt and send it in there that's going to make a meaningful difference in the output. So here I'm trying to create some lore. I know what location a person's at, and I know what they've asked for in terms of like, tell me something about the waterfall. And so it's going to make up a story about that. Here's an example of how, how I'm hitting the API. I wrapped it in these functions just because it's not too complex. I'm happy to pull up Xcode if you want. Yeah, this is what they're doing with the API and passing in Turbo. For the most part, I'm using 3.5. It's 4.0 is, depending on which exact one you're using, is something like 20 to 60 times more expensive. So I figure that might add up if I was using the latest model, and I've been getting pretty good results with 3.5. So yeah, so I'm just taking the not really much to do here other than that prompt that I constructed here. I'm passing it in and just have to pass in the model and hit the URL, get some this is the request data, and pass in the key. I feel like I should bring that up. I moved these slides around earlier, so so this is what we were just looking at. Yeah, so you can see a little bit there. I have to JSON encode it. Sending your bearer token. Pretty simple stuff. And this is why I say, like, you don't have to start with linear algebra. Like, if you could do some pretty cool stuff if you just hit some APIs, and you know what's out there. All right, let me show you more. This one I've changed up a little bit so I can show you how it works, but why do I keep doing that? Sorry. All right, so one of the things I did, one of the things I did was I made like a special action code to say, tell me about. So I could say about waterfall. Not working. So it'll make up a short little blurb based on what you're asking for. The way I did that, I was trying to play with the idea of having things that aren't always there and create some special keys. So if you give it that key of tell me more information, then I'll go and generate some lore for you. Let me take a note that I need to clean this part up.
Just curious, Byron, for a novice like me, any particular reason for using Elixir and some of this tooling?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a couple things that I really like about Elixir. I mean, one is this the live view stuff that you're looking at right now. Well, not now, but right here. That allows me to say, um, you know, when I do this, I didn't have to write any JavaScript to make this happen. It just happens. I
That's
could show
cool.
you. I could show you the code, but what it does behind the scenes is it creates a socket. You put values onto the socket with something called you assign a value,
Mhm.
and it's monitoring the DOM for you. So I'll have something that says, basically if there's output, show you the output. So when it's nil, nothing shows up. So all I have to do is say, output is now something, and Elixir and Phoenix handles rendering it for you.
Wow, very cool. Thank you.
It's super powerful. I'm not doing it much right now, but it's super powerful for with this app for like message passing between multiple people and callbacks. So I think that's something that is particularly well suited for this type of project where you're hitting an API and you're getting a response. So that's a good, I kind of glossed over that, but I should probably include that because it is one of the reasons why I think that Elixir and Phoenix are super well suited for this specific type of app. Is it's all message passing. So
Have you
and
experienced any latency in generating this text? Are you using the streaming option? I think that the OpenAI API has to.
I'm not using the streaming.
It's a good question.
You can notice a little bit of delay on the text generation. You'll see across the top, it'll do that sort of thinking thing every now and then. It's not too bad. It's maybe a second. Um, More noticeable is the image generation, which will take maybe 4 seconds. I didn't wire it up. That's what I'm sort of in the back of my mind thinking, just to show off Elixir, I probably should wire it up to have a response um, sort of tie into the app.
Yeah, because that really showcases how nice it plays with the AI APIs, because it'll just keep updating as it gets information from the back end that's talking with these external services. Which again is the beauty of live view. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, this is not part of the presentation necessarily, but I can show you, this was a different game I built where it's kind of like a Wordle game. Growing. Um, so the same thing, like there's no JavaScript here. It's just going to go and do essentially a lot of the same commands. Like I'm actually using the LLM for grammar verification on this thing. And then, this one does have the sort of the image pops in as soon as it's done generating. So,
That was
all right, so
neat. What are you using to host the sites then? The sites themselves that are doing the calls.
this is all using fly.io.
Okay, thank you.
So you'll see every now and then a little bit of when you first hit it, there'll
Uh-huh.
be it's serverless, so there's maybe a second delay or 2 seconds.
Mhm.
All right, let's go back to this. So that's generated text. So it's just throwing out some text. All right, then image generation. Same kind of concept. I'm going to hit API. I'm going to pass in a bunch of text, and you're going to get something that looks pretty cool. way I've incorporated this code is, oh, not full screen, am I? The way I've incorporated this code is you're going to, every time you do, create a new location, for instance, I'm going to first insert it, assuming that everything is okay. Then I don't have any other validation errors, and I'm going to create a hash out of the description, use that to create a image URL. So I generate the URL, I give it this prompt here, not too crazy, and then I hit a gen server in order to create some asynchronicity, and then I respond immediately. So this is where it's not super seamless. I'm not waiting, and I don't update the page as soon as the image comes back, but you'll see, I'll show you how it works in a second. You guys familiar with gen servers? Neil, okay. So it's basically one of the other things about Elixir is you have these bunch of lightweight processes, that's what they call them, that are sitting out there, and you can communicate with them. They give you states, but they also give you asynchronicity and message passing. So what I'm going to do with this code is say, hey, go create an image, let me know when it's done, and it'll come back. So again, pretty simple stuff. Let me show you how this works. Yes. Just break. All right, well, I did too much today. All right, I guess I broke this while I was playing around, but you'll just have to take my word for it. Geez.
The demo gods are not with you today, huh?
And the last time I gave a presentation, I purposely tempted the demo gods, and now they're coming to get me.
The
Well,
demo
this
gods always come for presentations.
This has been pretty cool. I especially like seeing how you made the embedding stuff work for figuring out more freeform input from people. That's pretty slick. A project I was working on used ChatGPT to generate trivia questions for a game. And I would have it generate and spit back out JSON for me that had the question as well as the answers, and it would tell me which one was the correct answer so that I could then check to see if someone had given their correct answer. But I could see how, and I would display like the choices for them, but I could see how I could make that more interesting with this, because I could still ask for the same thing for getting the question, but rather than display the choices, people could just answer the question, like type in whatever the answer is, and then I could, use that embedding trick like you showed to figure out which answer was closest to what they put in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a surprisingly powerful technique, I feel like. The other use case that um I won't show today, but like I had an app that had 3 different LLMs involved, because sometimes you would ask it like a question, like tell me something, some knowledge based thing, and it would retrieve information or just answer from its knowledge. Um, Another time you were giving it commands like go and add this um, record to a user, and it would go and do it. So those kind of things like um, are potentially best served with different use cases or different LLMs. And I feel like upfront embedding check can pretty easily distinguish between a command and a question. I mean, depending on how you phrase it, I guess. But all right. Well, that was supposed to be image generation. Structured text is really interesting. I probably need another bit of intuition about this, so please ask some questions. But um, the let me give you an example of what not to do. One of the meetups I went to last week, a person was telling us how he was trying to get his app to talk to an API with JSON. And so what he did was he took a open source text language model known to be good for code, and he fine-tuned it to understand JSON, and specifically the JSON related to that API. You don't have to do that. All you have to do, or there are different libraries out there that help you coerce the prompts into understanding JSON, and all the APIs now also support functions so they can talk JSON. But one of the things that's really powerful with um, this library called Instructor, it came from Python first, but now it's in Elixir, that it allows you to speak in terms of schemas and use all the validations that you already understand. And I'll show you how that works in a second. So the intuition is you give it a schema. I want a name, a description, a string, and a Boolean. You also, I guess I'm missing here, you give it a little bit of explanation of what these things mean, and you say go satisfy it. It'll handle things like retries as well. So any of those kind of problems that you may have had if you try to do this manually before, I know that I've done it a couple times, just saying give me CSV format, and information comes back and it's not quite CSV and blows up and you have to retry it. These libraries will handle it all for you. So
That's really cool. I'll have to check that out. Like I said, we were doing it the hand rolled way. We would tell it what we wanted for the JSON and we'd just say, hey, this is the structure I want. And it was pretty good. It would get it like at least 95+% of the time, it would give us what we wanted. But then yeah, we would have to retry sometimes on it. Just decided it was not good at JSON for that request for some reason.
well, I have a bit of code here, but I have better code now in the project. So let me go find it. But one of the really interesting things that aha moment came for me with this library, I had a chance to see the creator of it speaking, and at the Denver Elixir meetup. It was virtual, so maybe some of you guys were there, but he was saying, we're already really good at handling human input. We create with these chain sets and in Ecto, like a definition of schema and a definition of how we're expecting our fields to look. So in this case, I have this action that has a command and it has a description. So both of these things are required. And the command, I don't want it to be this crazy long thing. So even though, it's pretty, you could say I want a string. I can apply the exact same change set validators that we already know and love and give to humans and say, hey, that's too much, your password's too short, and that text. So here's the crazy thing is that textual response that says your passwords don't match or your password needs to include this thing is exactly what is fed back to the LLM if it fails to give you the data. So if it gives you, oh, here's what you asked for, but something is wrong, take the errors from the change set, feed it back to the LLM, and it understands English, right? So it can understand, oh, that's right, I'll make it shorter next time. It's just super cool. All right, so I'll show you how this is used. Here's an example of an instructor completion. So this is just using, essentially that text completion that we were using before, type of model. I give it the response that I'm looking for. So it'll go and read what I just showed you and give it a max retries. And then here is how I'm prompting it to say what I'm looking for. In this case, what I'm building up to is the ability for people to create the world that they're kind of going through. So based on what they ask for, they're going to create an action to go from one place to another that didn't exist before. So, I'm giving them the overall description of the quest, where you're coming from, where you want to go to, what the description is. All of that is fed to the LLM, and then it's going to come fill this out for me. And then I'm going to take that object and really just use these two fields as well as the fields I already understand to go and create a new action. But this is the structured text part. Does that make sense? Okay.
I'm curious if you've logged how many times you actually had to go back and retry. How often does it get it right the first time?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I don't feel like I've seen it happening in the logs, but I'm sure it does. Just my anecdotal with the first time I tried this, like Alex, was it failed about 10% of the time.
Yeah, and I'm sure the library probably does, but I mean, we've landed on certain things that if we phrase things the right way, it would just it would do better at generating the JSON for us. We also made our parser for the response a little bit more forgiving too, that helped reduce rejections. So like we found that sometimes it would follow our instructions and return just the JSON object, which is what we desired. We didn't want anything else with it. And it did that not as often as we wanted to. But then we found that if we just did little things like, oh, did it, stick the little markdown backticks with JSON around it, which is something that it loves doing. And we would just strip those out. And so I imagine the library maybe even does some stuff like that too, where it just, common stuff that it will layer in thinking it's helpful that isn't very helpful, and it'll not do a full retry, but just strip that stuff out to begin with.
Yeah, you're onto something, because one of the, I think, really kind of mind-blowing features of this library is it handles streaming, as you were saying before, Alex. Like it can do streaming of JSON data. So it'll handle the malformed end of the JSON. It'll just kind of end it basically, and then as more shows up, it'll provide you the deltas. So I haven't played with that yet, but it's pretty impressive. All right. All right, so that's the library, I mean, the instructor EX. Again, based on Python. If you go there, you'll see the README. It's based on the Python version. I think there's also a JavaScript or TypeScript version as well. So it's becoming pretty popular. I think that is an example of one of those things that showed up 2023. All right, so you guys have heard the term RAG. Are you guys pretty familiar with that? I know, Neil, I think you said you shook your head on that one.
Yeah, I haven't a whole lot with any of this, so.
Okay. All right, so RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. One of the ways I like to think about LLMs is as a like a smart college graduate that has amnesia. Because if you ask it the same question, if you ask the API, it won't remember what you've asked. You know, things like ChatGPT have built-in memory to it, so it'll sort of remember, but it doesn't have any memory, it doesn't have any recent knowledge, right? So if you ask it something, I think GPT-4 is only current as of March of last year. So it won't have any of that kind of stuff. And then yeah, so what you have to do if you want to ask it questions about something that's a little bit more topical, is you have to feed it information along with the question. So that's what I'm depicting here is you're going to ask it some question, you're going to go through an augmentation step, which is going to go get some additional context, and then it's going to combine that context with the prompt and then hand that off to LLM and get a response. Let me show you an example of how that works. So if you ask a question, this is a good example of a type of question that would not make sense to try to answer with the model in terms of fine tuning. It doesn't matter how recent the model is, this would never be a good question for the model alone. Which of my students currently have passing grades? So understand that question, you go through augmentation step, and then you pull out a list of the students with their grades. And then you give that to the LLM, and now I can tell you here's a list of, you know, all your students have passing grades. Does that make sense?
I'm curious how you do it. You know, that's an easy query, right? But I'm really keen to see how you combine the two, the prompt together with the query of the database to get the list of the grades.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll show you a couple different ways, but I mean, spoiler alert, it uses embeddings generally. But you know, if you know something about the user, I mean, some of the stuff that I've already showed you is I think technically RAG, but let's dive into the code. So here's an example. This is where the lore stuff that I was kind of continuing to tweak. Probably need to separate that. So what I'm doing with this code here is, you know, given a location and a person's request, I'm going to go generate some, you know, some lore for them. What I'm doing as a first step to that is say, can I get something that is related to the input? If I find something, then I'm going to feed that into the text generation. If I don't find something, I'm basically just going to make it up based on what they say. It'd be better to go straight to the code. I see why I'm confused. This should be get location by text. All right, so what I'm doing is when somebody passes in some text and say, tell me more about waterfall or whatever, I'm going to embed that. Look for something that's pretty closely related. So this is where we get a 20. If that's the case, I'm going to bring back the location that has an embedding that is kind of similar to what they've asked for. And then I'm going to use that location's description to go, generate some text. Otherwise, I'm just going to completely make it up. So this is an example of, using an embedding to go get some information and then passing that information into this guy so that I can, inject that code, right? The text pulled out here. And this is where I say, technically, I think this is also RAG as well, because I'm injecting some information about the game. So if I had a different game that was, a cyberpunk or something like that, it would create a totally different set of lore. Is that prompt engineering or is that RAG? I think they're so closely related. I mean, they're basically the same thing. Maybe RAG specifically implies the use of embeddings to find related content before loading the prompt up. And then I just go do the completion with that text.
And you found that the minimum distance of 0.2 seems to be a good approximation.
Yeah, I was playing with that earlier to come up with what I thought was a pretty good number. Seemed like a lot of things were in that like 15, 0.15 to 0.25 range. So I'm probably gonna play around with that a little bit more.
And that cosine distance function, what dependency are you relying on to get that? Or did you write that yourself?
No, it's part of the PG vector.
Oh, PG vector. Okay.
So one of the didn't really mention it strongly, but if you go to the embedding code here, I did write this article that kind of walks through the 7 actual steps of add this to your MX, blah blah blah, do this extension, add this extension to your database. There's a few different things you have to do step by step if you want to use PG vector.
So Byron, one last question, because I have to head out, but I'm just curious, like for the example game, the Questify, like what would you guess are the number of hours you had to put in to like get that first functional draft out there and you were happy with it? Is it take you a month, a week?
No, I know exactly, because I sort of got on a roll and did it all in one day. I think it ended at 5 a.m., but it was a long day to build most of it. Now, the real challenge has been, to me, what is a good use of some of these tools to demo it. Like the embedding one is pretty clear. I think it's a really good use case for that. What is a great use case for RAG? I mean, frankly, still trying to tweak what would be a perfect way to show that. And what I'm working on with the agentic stuff is, basically creating the world as you go, which I think is just a really interesting concept, but not sure exactly how I want it to work.
And one last question, Mike, will there be a recording of this? Number one, thanks for setting this up. I just have to run to some evening stuff, so just wanted to ask the question because I want to see the whole thing.
Yeah, I'll share the link in the meetup group. It'll be up on YouTube, but I'll make sure it's shared by tomorrow.
Okay. Well, thank you for this. This was awesome. I just have to leave a little early here.
No
So,
worries. Thanks for coming.
All good. I actually have to leave in not too long too. Good to see you, Neil.
yep. Take care, everybody.
Yeah, this has definitely given me some ideas for how to improve some of the projects I've been working on. I appreciate this this talk. It's been great. Again, going back to the trivia thing, I'm thinking one of the things that we always run into trouble. You mentioned the amnesia. It's troublesome there because we have ask it to generate stuff and it'll generate the same question. So we have to tell it, you've already given me all these questions. And so part of the prompt is like a history of all the questions it's given us for a topic. And then we say, try and give something new. But I think we can improve. It'll still sometimes return a question that's basically the same as one that already asked. It might be slightly different. But I could improve this by adding in use of those embeddings, by taking its doing embeddings on all the questions it's given us so far and compare it to what it most recently spit out and determine if it's likely a duplicate again and not keep it and tell it to generate more.
Yeah, another technique that I've looked at for comparing values is to pass back to the LLM and say, are these the same? Which may, if you're doing something like what you're doing, it may be more effective because embedding is going to tell you, are they, really very similar? But if the overall theme is the same or something like that, you may still not want to include it, and the LM could probably tell you a pretty decent answer on that. I could also give you the other thing that instructor in some of the examples they give is asking the LLM to rate things, like, give me a 1 to 100 or 1 to 10 value on certain things. Then the other thing you may want to look at is the temperature. I haven't really had to play with it beyond the 0.7. That's, I think, standard. But if you're getting a lot of repetitive answers, it sounds like, potentially you could up the craziness level.
Yeah, I was thinking about playing with the temperature I haven't actually done any of that yet to see what kind of effects that have, but I think it probably makes sense to try tweaking that just to see, do I get just nonsense or do I get better random questions or what do I get out of that by playing with the temperature?
Yeah, one of the other what is the data that you're getting in or you're asking questions about?
So we created a trivia game system where you could define what kind of trivia game you want and pick some categories and whatnot, and then ask, we'll ask the AI to generate questions for the categories. And we wanted to generate quite a few so that you can actually have a fun trivia game that lasts for a little bit. But within each category, it will sometimes get repetitive with its questioning, even when you tell it not to. But we've gotten it to a lot better now. But it does seem like, at least for certain topics, it gets hung up on certain things. And I think we need to just play around with the topics themselves that we're setting, because I think we might be too broad or too narrow on some of the topics, and that's impacting its ability to give us good questions.
Well, one of the things I'm not doing with this yet, but maybe I should, just in terms of breadth, is I've done before is using RAG in a sense of uploading a document, parsing out the document, and creating a set of chunks that you then use later. That might be a really good use case for you in terms of, I wouldn't really trust the LLM to give me accurate trivia answers anyway. I think you'd be better off like randomly, like kind of do RAG in the sense of random, pull in a bunch of data, give it some books and say, invent questions based on this thing I'm handing you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And we had a lot of we had a couple team members who were very suspect of us generating actual trivia questions, and is it going to be able to understand the right, is it going to have the right answers and whatnot. But we did some tweaking with the prompt generation and really playing around with directives to it. And we found that overall it was actually extremely good at generating questions with accurate, true answers. The only caveat that we would run into sometimes is, again, the age limitations on some of the info. So especially on like sports questions, they would get out of date because it'll ask a question like, who is the most high scoring basketball player in the NBA or something like that. And then based on its data, it was accurate at one point in time, but it's no longer, and then we had to fix it. But it's actually been very good at generating correct answers. And you have to tell it though, don't give it a lot of leeway. Our first attempts, it just would make stuff up. But if you really peg it down into specifics and make it clear that you want accurate, factual answers, and there should only be one true answer for each question, it does pretty good at it.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it sounds like a really interesting project for sure. All right, let me jump into agents a little bit. Give you at least the intuition. This is an area that I'm still working on from a demo perspective. Now that my images are broken, I fear that I've broken other things, but agents are definitely the most powerful element or portion of this, where the intuition is this. If you go to ChatGPT right now, you can say, write me some code, blah, 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 and then it spits out the code. Agents allow you to do the same thing, but then actually execute the code. Which sounds scary, but that, I think with the right set of guardrails and things, you can manage it. So the major one that gets a lot of attention is a Python or JavaScript library called LangChain. There is a version in Elixir. I was taking a look at it this week. It's definitely not as mature yet, but maybe it'll get there. I think that this is one of those things that is particularly well suited for functional programming and for Elixir, because it's the way that it works is you're as the name would imply, you're chaining different elements from one to the next, which sounds a lot like pipes. And I'll give you a couple examples. Like one is, you can ask it a pretty complex math problem. LLMs aren't great at math, by the way. So what you do with LangChain is you actually define a set of tools and you tell it something like, this tool is really good for math. This tool is good for searching the internet. This tool is good for telling the time, like in English words. And then this question comes into LangChain. It tries to understand what you're asking for. It pulls out different components of it, and then it decides which of the tools it wants to use on its own. And then it applies those tools, and then it'll give you like an English response back. I have the one I used to do in demos before was ask it like, what is half of the number of people in Canada? So in order to get an answer, kind of like what you're saying, like to get a number that is accurate, it would have to actually go search the internet. It would come up with the number, and then it would have to then apply a calc tool, divide. It understands half of to mean divide by 2, and then put it all together and then answer you in English. Half the number of people is blah blah blah. So that's the area I still need to add into this presentation. But I hope you guys sort of follow along as this project continues. Hopefully, I can put some more stuff up there around agents. You can pull down the code, kind of figure out, if you want to integrate instructor, integrate any of these API calls, all the code is there. Pretty much all I had.
Okay, I have a quick question about when you generate the word vectors from the embeddings, I guess.
Mhm,
And then you calculate the cosine distance.
mhm.
In that, when the comparison is made, does it take into account the sequence, the actual sequence of words? Or is it just kind of that mixture, so that if I say the cat in the hat, or I switch that around and say the hat in the cat, it would compute to the same vector? Just curious.
Yeah, it will definitely take it into consideration. I think it will still be lexically pretty close. Not zero, but it'll be pretty close.
Okay.
And then if you said the dog in the hat, it would also, wouldn't be as close, but it would be pretty close. But then throw in the car or something like that, and then now it's getting further away.
Right.
The car in the hat.
The car in the hat. The hat in the car.
Cool. Any other questions? That's a good question. You made me think one, I was using the cosine difference as part of the PG vector. Alex, I think you were asking where that came from too. There is, if you use NX, there is, it's one of those libraries, either NX
The
or
Axum or
or Scholar that has a cosine
distance function.
well. Yeah,
Yeah.
so if you take that embedding, which is really just an array of floats, you can hand that off. It plays well with NX, so you can create a tensor out of that and then manipulate it in a standard way.
Very
How
cool.
big are your vectors? I'm curious so far.
They're all the same. They're sort of defined. They're 15, 36, 36.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when you install the PG vector, you have to, all the steps are in there. We have to make a couple different changes, but I think that's a data type that doesn't generally exist, so you have to add it into your ecto data types. Cool.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
I would be curious to know what your experience, guys, are with fine-tuning models, like just going beyond the prompt engineering and prompt tweaking. How much data did you have to use to get? I mean, it obviously depends it varies from case to case, but yeah, our team is working in Python. So I'm not sure how good Elixir infrastructure for that is. Just curious to hear what the experience are.
Yeah, I haven't done any fine tuning, so I don't know if anyone else has.
No.
Yeah, it's I guess it yeah, it requires a strong business case probably to go to venture in that.
That's my point too, is kind of like exhaust where you're at and then go. But I did write this up sort of my feelings on RAG versus fine tuning.
Hmm.
There's certainly use cases where they one or the other will benefit. I think for the most part, like the real timeness of I can inject information immediately into RAG versus I have to go even fine tuning takes some time. And then if I had something like, you know, that list of students or something like that, I'm not going to fine tune a model for every teacher. I just have to inject that information. I think you can get better information or decision making through the LLM with fine tuning, most likely. And then this cost question, I think, is also very interesting. Like if you are going to be sending in, like you see people discussing context windows, this one has 100,000 tokens, blah, blah, blah. Like that's a lot of money. So if you can fine tune something up front so that you then have to inject less tokens every time you make a call, potentially it actually pays off in the long run. But if you're only going to, you know, call that thing 1,000 times, you might as well just load up the prompt with a ton of information. And this may not be accurate. I put references there, meaning if you like I've seen this on, there's a couple different coding tools that give this where it'll tell you an answer and then it'll tell you where it got that answer from, because if it's from RAG, it knows where I pulled the chunk or the document. I think when it comes to just training into an LLM, you don't really know where it got that knowledge from necessarily.
Yeah, the knowledge is an interesting aspect of it. My experience tells me that it's much like with event sourcing. If you even ever plan to use LLM, it's better to start storing all the value, all the knowledge can even potentially be valuable, because that is going to become your data mode, and basically a treasure cove on which you can fine tune your LLM. And in hindsight, it's very hard to figure out what knowledge was valuable. So as much, just store as much as you can from your business processes, from the exchanges that are, I mean, the data that is human generated and that can present any business value. It's fine to try to store it as much as possible, even if it's not in the hot storage, not in the primary database, in something, I don't know what people are using nowadays. For example, even in ClickHouse, something that can compress, it's very nice. For example, 1:5 storage, 1:5 ratio with Postgres. Just keep it somewhere, and then
I mean, it's text too. I mean, it should be very cheap. So
yeah, exactly. S3, whatever.
all right. Yeah.
Something I want to throw out while we're on and this topic is recently there's been some questions about legal issues regarding copyright of what's in the LLM and where it came from. And obviously it's not quite possible always to know what came from where. So I don't know how the legal side of that's going to play out, but it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, one of the I'm no expert. One of the things that I've heard from OpenAI, right, is they offer you some indemnification on their models. So if somebody comes and sues you using their stuff, then they will, go to battle for you, I guess. I think there's a stickier question, which is, okay, how do I prove that whatever I created, maybe it's a little bit more obvious for like an image or something, but if it was textual or something, how would I prove that it came through them and not a different stack or different solution? Yeah. Again, another vote for keeping track of everything in and out, because that you may need it for legal purposes.
And we engineers never think about the legal. Almost never.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I mean, and the other thing that I worry about is consumer privacy concerns. Using an LLM for that is pretty tricky, I think. Something like this game is fine. Something about your information, depending on what my app is. I'm going to be looking at self-hosting LLM myself, under hardware and APIs that I control, so that I know that nothing is being, stored in an access log even. OpenAI says they won't do any training on what you send them, but that doesn't mean I haven't sent social security number over the wire to somebody that I don't have a strict agreement with. So it's another area of concern, privacy.
That's actually, that triggered a chain of thought for me. For example, let's consider in this game, you will capture all the prompts that users are putting in, and then you will find the most popular ones, or the one with the highest sentiment and engagement, and start tweaking text, towards, making a slight hint towards people, using those prompts. So trying to create a feedback loop to make game more engaging. Then you kind of harvested like thousands of prompts. Like, who is the copyright owner here? Like, is there even any person that can come and say, okay, I created this, I gave you that information that made your propelled your project to top 100 in Alexa. Like, share with me revenue from the ads.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, I think that's probably true for any app. Who owns the usage information? I would say that the app owners would probably argue that they own it.
I would say don't bother with it at all, because if you look at the stock market, everything touches LLM. It's so hot right now. There will be so much money in it that people will just not care until it's too late. I mean, you cannot stop.
Yeah.
You cannot stop the beast. That's it.
I think that's why OpenAI is fine saying, we'll cover you, don't worry, use our stuff. I know it's probably not really that concerning for them. They don't want to stifle innovation.
Great.
All right. Well,
I know you said you got a hard line in 90 minutes.
yeah, I got to take off in a little bit. It was really good to chat with you guys. Thanks for it definitely helped me find some sticky areas I need to work on. So I appreciate it.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for that, and best of luck with the conference. Hope yeah, this was a good trial run for you, and it all goes well on the big day.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you all. Nice to meet
Awesome.
you.
Thank you. Very
Cheers.
good
Take care.
presentation.
Thanks.
Thank you. Awesome presentation.
Thank you.